There's nothing quite like hitting the road for an unknown amount of time, especially when traversing one of the most beautiful, drivable coastlines in the world, Highway 101. A lot has happened in the month that we traveled this highway. We've documented some of it and want to take you along on this experience that has meant a lot to us. This video is not intended to be a travel guide, but more of an adventure of two people who simply love the American West.
So hop into our van with us. We call her the Black Whale. And we'll start off by going to Mount Rainier National Park. Now you might be thinking, that's not exactly Highway 101, and you'd be correct, but we've decided to include it because we didn't start the road trip on Highway 101. In our case, coming from the east, we couldn't pass up the opportunity to see this incredible landmark. If you want to skip ahead to just Highway 101, we've left a timestamp below.
What's funny is that we didn't really end up going into the actual national park itself, seeing that there were lines that exceeded normal wait times. Instead, we found one of the hikes near the park entrance to be the most beautiful and least traveled. We found this patch of nature that felt like we were in Eden. It was still and quiet with the exception of a few bees buzzing and the eventual bear sighting in the far distance, which was our signal to leave.
The mountainous terrain is covered in a layer of moss, small snowmelt creeks, and its residents. Flowers, all kind of silent life that makes itself apparent anywhere you look.
After staying in North Bend, Washington for a few days, we explored the areas that have been made known by the TV show Twin Peaks. Aside from the fact that we're fans of the show, these areas are really as beautiful in real life as they have been captured on camera, such as the mountains included in the intro, the old abandoned Weyerhaeuser lumber mill and its grounds, which includes the sheriff's office, the vehicle that Sheriff Harry S. Truman and his crew have traveled in, the bridge Ronette Polaski was found at, Twede's Cafe, which is not to be missed, and the spectacular falls that are the crown jewel of the show. For a more detailed video on Twin Peaks, check out our Twin Peaks review video.
All of this was followed by stomping around Seattle for a few days, followed by Whidbey Island, where we made it just in time to visit the farmer's market. It is here that we bought all of our produce for camping for the next few days. Our favorite cafe became Flowers Cafe, which is just a part of a complex that includes a beautiful plant nursery. After fueling up on some sandwiches, it was time to explore Deception Pass State Park.
The state park is based on a narrow ocean channel that separates Whidbey Island from Fidalgo Island, which are connected by a pair of bridges called the Deception Pass Bridge Cross. The state park itself is made up of the surrounding 3,854 acres of land that surround the bridge crossing, which used to be a military reserve. The bridges are obviously aesthetically pleasing, but they are quite an impressive structure as well, spanning a total of 1,500 feet and carrying approximately 20,000 vehicles across it each day. It is said that the New Deal initiative by the Roosevelt administration was responsible for the construction of the two bridges that were completed in 1935. The state park is blanketed in layers of Spanish moss, unusual tree formations, rocky climbs, and a relaxing beach. I thought this tree kind of looked like the head of a buffalo. There's quite a few hiking trails to choose from. That evening, we ate crab cakes in Anacortes, which is the town I picture in my head when I think about a historic fisherman's town in the Pacific Northwest. And gas was pretty cheap up here.
This is Graham. Now we're really heading to Highway 101. But first, we crossed the Seattle Bainsbridge ferry. It was a clear and sunny day, and we got to see the whole skyline in our rear view. we're heading to Port Angeles, where our plan is to do some laundry and clean up before we make our way to Rainforest for the night.
We all know what's coming up next.
Laundry review! We found a strange laundromat in the middle of nowhere called Peabody Street Coin Laundry, which has supposedly been a laundromat since the 1920s, which is what the current owner told us, who was a really friendly guy, by the way. The locals here are quite the characters.
The laundromat is equipped with different sizes of washers and dryers, all very clean and self-explanatory to use. While the building is a bit on the older side, it maintains its character through the old "Suds and Such" signs and "Sorry No Pets Allowed" posters, which look like they've been there since before we were born. Trespass here. The dryer we used had varying options between no heat, medium heat, and high heat. If I recall correctly, it cost 25 cents per 30 minutes. The folding tables looked clean and didn't have any scratches that our clothes could hook onto. It was a great folding experience overall. Our drive took a little bit longer than expected, and we arrived at the Rainforest later that evening, so we made our campfire meal and went to sleep.
That next morning, we woke up to a subdued sunlight flowing through hanging mosses, which also provide a nice camping experience, seeing that you can barely hear any of the other campers. Nature's soundproofing. This would be a great place to record or play music.
Our teabag wisdom for this morning stated that talking to plants is a direct way of talking to spirit. And while we believe it, in our modern society you'd probably be sent to be talking directly to a psychiatrist because people will see you as crazy. But we did the rebellious thing and listened to our teabag quote anyway, and went talking to plants the rest of the day. These included various species of mosses and lichens, and ancient, some of which gigantic trees, and the occasional caterpillar.
The Hall of Mosses hike includes trees that are completely blanketed by shaggy, fuzzy mosses, varying between light green and darker, more vivid green colors. These trees are stunning, and some of their barks looked like leather. Even in bright daylight, the forest is shaded, and it's an ideal hike for people who get overheated quickly. It felt like everywhere you looked, there was a different species of moss, plants hanging out. The whole experience is very visually stimulating. I think our favorite kind of moss was the long, shaggy, flow with the wind kind. One interesting phenomenon is that of nursing logs, which is where an old tree dies and collapses, and the new trees spring up from within the nutrient-dense soil from the decayed tree. As the new trees spring up, their roots wrap beautifully around what remains until the decayed tree is completely dissolved and you're left with this tunnel of roots that connects the various trees.
The forest feels like you're in a real-life fairy tale setting. You can feel that these trees contain ancient information that corresponds with what we as humans are made of. The very primordial fibers that make up these trees are not unlike what humans are composed of, considering we share at least 50% of our DNA with trees, particularly those of pine trees, which is also why the pine tree has been revered in ancient tradition and cultures, such as those of the Druids, and is also why our pineal glands are associated with divine consciousness and clairvoyance. Perhaps that's a discussion for a different video, but we do like to search for things like these when traveling to these ancient places.
We continued on down Highway 101 and stopped for a while to tumble around the dunes and watch the ocean. In Aberdeen, we paid our respects to Kurt Cobain, which is to both Doris and I a hero from our youth, which I'm sure he was to many. He claimed to have lived under this bridge for a while.
We made our way down to Astoria by passing through Long Beach. The entrance to Astoria is absolutely fantastic, seeing that you're greeted with what is considered to be the largest truss bridge in North America. Astoria is a very pretty historic town and is home to the famous Goonies house. The house is currently private property, but the owners are supposedly used to Goonie fan traffic.
We drove our way down to the famous Goonies Beach, also known as Haystack Rock, but unfortunately it was too dark and our camera didn't have the proper settings to capture low light conditions.
Well guys, this is the the Goonies Beach. We got here a little late.
We could see it, but our camera couldn't.
That morning we woke up a little bit east of Multnomah Falls, namely the Wyeth Campground, which is a pretty simple spot to camp at if you want to check out the falls and Portland the next day, which is exactly what we did.
Located on historic Route 30, also known as Highway 84, Multnomah Falls is an epic waterfall on the Columbia River Gorge. The beautiful bridge below the waterfall was built all the way back in 1914. It's said to be the tallest waterfall in the whole state of Oregon, and its waters are sourced from the underground springs of Larch Mountain. It's speculated to have been formed around 15,000 years ago by the Missoula floods. However, the Multnomah tribe believes the waterfall was formed after a young woman sacrificed herself to the Great Spirit to save Multnomah Village from a plague. After her death, water began to flow from above the cliff, and the peoples were saved from the plague.
Then we went up to Portland for some food before continuing on to Lincoln City. Obviously, we had to stop at Highway 101 Burger, which is a classic, and this restaurant is just really a classic and laid-back American fast food joint.
Upon waking from our campsite, we headed to Devil's Punch Bowl, which used to be called Satan's Cauldron when it was first discovered. It's a beautiful natural formation that really does seem like some sort of otherworldly force was involved in its creation, with harsh, blazoning waves striking their essence against the razor-sharp rocks that have been formed over who knows how long.
This observation area offers quite the panorama that includes the sight of surfers attempting to govern the ocean with their surfboards, while the ocean birds watch their entertaining forms of recreation. The houses leading up to the area are thoughtfully decorated to match the natural area around them, with their favorite being the house with its tree covered in buoys.
A little further down the road, we made a stop at Yaquina Head Lighthouse, Oregon's tallest lighthouse, which lays on a peaceful and serene basalt headland area that costs, I believe, $10 to enter. The lighthouse's beacon has been guiding ships since 1873 and doubles as a secret bird clubhouse. After that, we set up camp at Tillicum Beach Campground for the night and continued on south to more devil-themed natural formations, namely Devil's Churn in Yachats.
A foggy drive further, we stumbled upon Heceta Head Lighthouse by parking near, you guessed it, Devil's Elbow. What's up with all the devil-themed stuff? And walking out to the lighthouse on the beautiful forest trail. The lighthouse is owned by the bread and breakfast right beside it. I highly recommend checking out the gift shop because the elderly lady who works there is really friendly. The hike up there is absolutely worth it, especially on a misty and overcast day, which for some reason are some of my favorite types of days, especially when it's on Highway 101 to visit an old lighthouse with a beautifully rusted roof. What I love most about being on Highway 101 is that everything has a certain sea patina, if that makes sense. Everything seems to be covered in a light layer of moss and rust, and I can't think of anything more magical than that.
Then, upon descending from the cliff, we hung out on the beach for a while and made friends with a seagull peacefully bopping along like a buoy, and checking out the magnificent creations of the earth, such as the caves that line this entire beach area.
Next up is Sea Lion Caves, which is practically right next to the lighthouse, where you can view the ocean from coin-operated tower viewers. You can also observe the previously seen Hesida Lighthouse from here. But that's not all, for there's a secret underground complex you can enter to view sea lions. They occasionally appear here, but obviously these are wild animals who have the capability of journeying the entire ocean as they please. So it's not guaranteed that they'll be here in this exact spot. Sea Lion Caves is unlike a zoo where animals are caged against their will, but rather are an observation and learning area for these creatures. The caves are lined with colored lights and old-school black light-looking information screens, a sea lion skeleton, and a lookout area.
Before 1961, you had to descend into the cave with stairs, but they changed that and added an elevator, which descends the equivalent of a 12-story building. Here you can see a little cigar shape, which is a sea lion. Right when I reached for the camera, he went deeper into the ocean.
Our next stop was North Bend, which is a historic town with a lumber mill and shipyard, followed by its neighboring Coos Bay, taking a glimpse at the old Tioga Hotel and the Egyptian Theater.
And of course, we couldn't really go on a Highway 101 trip without trying the clam chowder, at least at a few places. And between the two of us, we split a bread bowl and fish and chips.
Making our way further down, we reached Kissing Rock, where we ran around for a while and took some time off from driving.
The next day, we made our way across the border into California. We started off with Crescent City, which could be viewed as the headquarters to the Redwood National Park area. Even so, it's a pretty sleepy town, especially around Battery Light Point, which is home to one of the first lighthouses on the California coast. We spent an afternoon there doing nothing but looking out at the water.
Then we made our way down to Trees of Mystery and its End of the Trail Museum, which contains a collection of Native American art, crafts, and tools.
It was time to set up camp for the day in the Del Norte Coast Redwoods State Park. We stayed there for a few days to rest up from all the driving and check out the redwoods, of course. We got a site that was right next to a giant redwood stump. 95% of all redwoods have been cut down between the 1850s and 1970s, and a lot of railroad tracks in the States are made out of them. They're very strong and robust trees, seeing that they're more resistant to insects, fire, and rot.
It was time to clean up for the night and go on an evening hike. The forest is not unlike the Hoh Rainforest, full of moss, ferns, and trees from days past.
Some of the trees contain tunnels in their trunks, which have been formed by fires that get into the heartwood in the middle of the tree. These trees are still very much alive. They just grow around these injuries and continue to thrive. Bats like to hang out around in these areas, so be careful randomly stepping into one. They're also called goose pens because pioneers used to keep their chickens and geese inside of them. The tops of the trees are ecosystems in their own respect, with birds, lichens, and other animals that don't exist on the ground. For instance, the wandering salamander lives its entire life at the top of one redwood tree. Of course, there's also life on the soil, like this little friend we made.
The next morning, we were greeted with the presence of what seemed like dozens of elk wandering around, including the bull of the herd, rubbing his antlers against the trees and brush to assert his dominance.
This was followed by a cruise through Eureka, checking out the Victorian homes that line its streets, and driving down the Hall of Giants. The Hall of Giants is essentially a long, winding road that's lined with redwood trees spanning different ages. Everywhere you look on the ground, there's something to see, like these incredible clovers emerging from a blanket of pine needles.
I think we then cruised to Garberville. For the life of me, I can't remember which town this was.
Then on to Confusion Hill, which is known as the home of mystery, fun, and family entertainment in the beautiful Northern California redwoods since 1949. It's one of those roadside attractions that's built to seem like it defies gravity, and we couldn't pass on the grip test.
Thanks. Now put your hand on my crystal ball.
Damn.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Esmeralda. Twin Towers Memorial Tree.
That's some good opportunism at work there.
It's one of those things that are part of the Highway 101 road trip experience, for it's been there for multiple generations, and when you enter the place, it looks like it hasn't changed since its inception. It's a cool concept, and we recommend going here. The humble entry price of $5 is bound to persuade your decision-making, especially considering most tourist traps on Highway 101 are out for blood. How did it do that?
Watch this.
Speaking of roadside attractions, we went on to see the chandelier tree, which is something we couldn't pass up. Our van didn't fit through it, seeing that the clearance is pretty low. This tree also has a hollow middle and seems to have survived the fire that caused it with no problem. Who knows how long this thing's been around? It's a very impressive sight.
That officially concludes the Highway 101 portion of our road trip. But don't despair, since we're continuing on to Highway 1 for our next trip. See you next time, my friends.